Welcome to Abstract Audio, the podcast presenting life as an abstract art form. The show that encourages you to perceive beyond the tangible, to extract the infinite from the finite, to see with the mind what you cannot physically see with the eyes. Oh, it's an emancipation. It's an exploration into areas usually overlooked. Explore with me on today's episode. Hey there, abstract adventurers. As you know, I am Amber Janae, and what can I say? You've wandered back into the world of abstract audio, where the questions are big, the answers are vague, and the fun is real. Last time, as you know, I know, we all know, we dug deep into the idea of talent and success, the grind, the hustle, the endless pursuit of greatness and fulfillment, right? We talked about how people get so obsessed with winning this kind of rigged game, but let's take a moment to actually think about what that kind of obsession really costs us. I mean, think about it. When you're constantly in the spotlight, going hard, giving it your all, pushing for greatness, what's the first thing to go? You guessed it, your time and your privacy. So today, we're peeling back the layers on privacy, How does success kind of eat away at it? How do we navigate a world that expects us to be constantly visible, right? Constantly available. And most importantly, where do we draw that line between what we share and what we keep for ourselves? Yep, it's really crazy just how quickly the conversation about success can just naturally lead us into the idea of privacy. I mean, all our episodes are connected, but when you're trying to be somebody, right? When you're climbing that ladder and putting yourself out there, the very concept of not being seen kind of becomes more of a luxury, right? And suddenly everything you do is in the public eye. Your wins, your failures, your relationships, your breakdowns, your mentee bees, as the kids call it. It seems like everybody wants a piece of you. And before you know it, your life is not really your own. It's content. And listen, y'all know we live in a world where the lines between public and private are literally more blurry than ever. I mean, social media has made sure of that. The same people who spend hours perfecting their craft, pouring their souls into their work, are now just expected to share their lives, their daily thoughts, their breakfast smoothie recipes, whatever. It's not enough anymore to be good at something. You also have to be seen being good at it. And if you're not, are you even #winning? Well, here's the thing. That's where privacy starts to slip away. It's no longer about just your work or your talent. It's about the whole package now, right? People don't just want to see what you do. They want to see how you do it. They want to see you. They want to know everything, your habits, your quirks, your failures, your personal life. They want access to the whole thing. Even the stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with your talent or immediate success. We got fantastic artists and entrepreneurs out here now that have to be content creators by default. And a lot of them, including myself, kind of hate it. Like, what kind of shit is that? But here's the real question. When does that spotlight become a prison? When does sharing your success turn into exposing your soul to strangers who don't know you, don't care about you, and will probably forget you as soon as the next viral thing comes along? It's funny though, we chase success all our lives, thinking it's going to make us feel whole. But more often than not, it leaves us exposed, vulnerable. Because, hey, success is great, right? Until it starts to feel like you're living in a glass house, so to speak, where every move is scrutinized, where people feel entitled, taking it back to episode 1, to know everything about you. And that's the thing, the more successful you get, the more you lose the one thing that keeps you grounded in your art, your privacy, and what you do in it. I mean, you can't realistically master any skill without working on it in your own private time, right? Right. It almost seems like the more we give, the more we lose. And I mean, it's not just celebrities and influencers who feel it, nowadays. We all do. Every time we post something online, every time we share a little piece of ourselves, we're giving up a tiny bit of our privacy. And before you know it, you're not just succeeding in your craft, you're performing for the whole world, 24/7. And trust me, that's a whole different kind of success and a whole different kind of burden. And it's one that comes with a cost. Because let's be real, without privacy, what are we really left with? If I'm telling the truth here, I see privacy as like this invisible shield we all pretend to have. In an age where most people will show their bare ass on social media, but would still lose it if you open their mail. It's kind of funny, right? Like, privacy is that last little corner of ourselves that we hold on to when everything else is being broadcast or sold or filtered into some sort of polished, curated feed. But the real question is privacy even a right anymore? Was it ever? Or is it just something we've traded away for convenience and likes and free 2-day shipping? Because let's be honest, every time you click agree without reading that fine print, you're basically signing over your soul to the data gods. And for what? So Alexa can remind you to buy more laundry detergent? Seems like a pretty steep price. But let's just back up for a second, okay? Back up. Because is privacy a fundamental human right? Or is it just something society tells us we can have until it becomes inconvenient for the powers that be? Because, hey, if the government decides they need to, say, peek into your emails for national security purposes, are you really gonna be the one to stop them? You gonna pull an Apple? And let's not even get started on big corporations. They already know everything about you. From your favorite Netflix binge to that weird time you Googled how to peel a mango at 2 a.m. No judgment. We've all been there. Though, speaking of hidden tabs, let's talk about what else people tend to hide. You know what? Matter of fact, let's talk about masks. No, not the pandemic kind. No, get over it. But the metaphorical ones. Like, have you ever heard the saying, if you want to see a man's true nature, give him a mask? It's true, isn't it? Because put someone behind anonymity and suddenly their real self comes out. It's like people on the internet who turn into straight up monsters because they're hiding behind a username like Big Daddy 224. No accountability, no face, no case, just raw unchecked bullshit. Remember that 90s movie, The Mask? The one with Jim Carrey? The plot was simple if you haven't seen it. He put on this mask and you suddenly become someone else entirely. But that someone else wasn't really someone else. It's you, just the unfiltered, uninhibited version. The one that's been dying to come out but had to stay hidden under layers of social niceties and, laws. Well, that's kind of how privacy works too. When we think no one's watching, we become the raw, uncut version of ourselves. It's both terrifying and liberating. I mean, just think about all those who's in the house scary movies, And there's something so terrifyingly primal about the idea of someone invading our personal space, right? It's like it taps into this deep, almost instinctual need for boundaries. And we talked boundaries last season, so I won't get too into it, but we literally freak out when we even think someone's watching us in our most vulnerable moments. Why? Because the mask slips. Privacy, or the lack of it, forces us to confront our true nature. And maybe we're not always comfortable with what's lurking beneath the surface. Especially during spooky season, when we're all just a little bit more jumpy than usual. Us introverts are always just a little bit more careful around this time too, We're in the house more, so we're always double checking behind the shower curtains or running up the stairs extra quick and all that. I mean, not to single anybody out, but you've got introverts and extroverts, right? And the idea of privacy hits them in completely different ways. Like for an introvert, privacy is something sacred. It's like the air they breathe. It's their retreat from the chaos of the world. While extroverts, well, they live out loud. So privacy, it's more optional. It's why you've got those people who post every meal, every gym session, every single thought that crosses their mind to the timeline. For some, privacy is a prison. For others, it's freedom. That's where it gets kind of tricky for me. Just because extroverts seem more comfortable sharing doesn't mean that they don't crave privacy too. Everybody got that one thing they don't share, whether it's your girl or your space or whatever. That one little piece of themselves they have to keep tucked away. So let's circle back to the bigger question, right? Can privacy be considered an intrinsic right? I mean, all we get here is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Nobody ever said nothing about no privacy. It's true. And I mean, sure, in theory, everyone should have the right to privacy, but life ain't always fair. And in practice, not so much. It's like saying everybody deserves a slice of the pie. Realistically, there are only a few pieces. I mean, sure, you can ask for it, but getting it, that's a whole nother story. We live in a world where privacy is treated like a commodity. Something you have to negotiate for, not something you just get. Especially if you have kids, okay? And whether we like it or not, it's a weird system, where privacy is both expected and denied at the same time. And no one's really sure how we got here. I'm looking at you, Apple. I'm looking at you, Netflix. And what about respecting other people's privacy? Is there a moral obligation to respect it? Say, okay, I'll give you an example, a hypothetical, if you will. I mean, it's a classic dilemma, right? On one hand, we want to protect people's boundaries. Well, some of us do. But on the other, we also want to blow the whistle when we see something's kind of sketchy. It's the same reason we get caught up in gossip, snooping through people's stuff, Hey, don't judge me. And don't act like you haven't scrolled through someone's 38-week-old Instagram posts, okay? Or watched reality TV train wrecks. There's just a part of us that loves peeking behind the curtain, even when we know we shouldn't. We're drawn to messy. We're drawn to those private parts of other people's lives because deep down we know our own lives are just as chaotic. And hey, theirs may be a little bit more interesting at the moment. Does that make it right? Of course not. But hey, when has that ever stopped humanity? Now, what happens when we lose our privacy? When everything is just out in the open and there's nowhere to hide. I mean, psychologically speaking, it's a nightmare, right? The constant surveillance, whether it's cameras on every corner, those bird cameras, social media monitoring, or just that feeling like you're always being watched, can mess with your head, man. You lose that sense of self. Worst case scenario, you're no longer just living, you're performing. Eventually, you don't even know who you are anymore without the audience. If you always feel like you're being watched, can you ever really relax? Do you ever really let your guard down? Probably not. You know, and it really takes a heavy toll. Imagine the anxiety, you know, the self-consciousness. It piles up until you're basically a shell of who you once were. Privacy, guys, is more than just a right. It's a necessity. Without it, we lose a little bit of what makes us human. So, where does that leave us humans? We can debate on whether privacy is a right or a privilege all day long. But the reality is, it's slipping away. One data breach and one overshare at a time. And while we may not be able to stop the world from peeking into our lives, we can at least take control of what we choose to show or not show. After all, isn't that the whole point of wearing the mask in the first place? So, as we head out of spooky season and turn off all those horror flicks, you know, remember, the real fear shouldn't be the monsters lurking outside in the dark. It's in the ones we keep hidden inside, you know, behind layers of privacy, masks, and half-truths we tell ourselves. The question is, when the mask comes off, are you ready to face what's underneath? Ready is an understatement, because I want to see each and every one of those faces. Tune into our YouTube channel every other week. And as we close out the year, be extra sure, each and every one of you guys like and subscribe. Be sure to share and comment too, and I'll see you guys next time. Until then, always appreciate the abstract in your life.